In. Welcome to Coffee Talk, you guys. I have put in the chat box some current opportunities locally and regionally and abroad that you guys might be interested in. Big one right now is Arts KC has their inspiration grant live that closes at the end of the month. We'll be teaming with Interurban Art House to host a little info session for the inspiration grant. I'll put that link in the chat box as well. That'll be on the 16th. The info session will be next week. And also Charlotte Street has their studio residencies back open again in the fall. So that'll be a 2-year free studio space through Charlotte Street. So definitely apply for that if you're seeking workspace right now. And then there's some other fairs that are getting kicked off again. Westford Art is accepting applications and some other things. Let's see what else is happening down here. The Salina Art Center is looking for a new curator. If you're job hunting right now, lots of really good opportunities. And I'm going to give, we'll wait until about 10:05 and get started. A couple more minutes. You guys want to refill your coffee, whatever you need to do.
Where's Debbie Williams?
I'm gonna go upstairs and listen to the coffee talk.
People don't have their video going.
Okay, guys, I think we can kind of slowly get started. There was a note that my audio was kind of in and out. If that's happening, someone just let me know. But yes, welcome everybody. So good to see you guys virtually. Thank you for joining us for Coffee Talk on this, at least it can be a little bit rainy morning. Again, as mentioned in the chat box, there are some current opportunities and things to apply for, so definitely check those out. Really great inspiration grant through Arts KC. The studio residencies through Charlotte Street are back up and going. Art Westport, Missouri Arts Council is always looking for artists to feature. All those links are here in the chat box. If you guys have any questions about these opportunities, we can talk about it at the end. We'll save like the last 10-15 minutes if we want to talk about that stuff. But today we are here because the lovely Emmett Merrell, our March exhibiting artist, is here joining us virtually from St. Louis. I'm going to introduce Isabel Vargas, who we haven't had the chance to meet yet. She's our new exhibitions director. We're so happy to have her here at KCAC. And I'm going to let her take it away from here. We are going to save questions for Emmett until the end, and you can definitely populate those in the chat box as we go, and then we'll kind of go back to those when he's done with his presentation. Yeah, you guys need anything, just put it in the chat box or reach out to me directly in the chat box. And I'll turn it over to Isabel. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Hi, guys. Thank you for being here. I'm just going to give you guys a quick introduction to Emmett Merrill. Emmett Merrill is a self-publishing St. Louis-based artist and printmaker. Born in Kansas City, Missouri, Emmett holds a BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute and an MFA from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Emmett Merrill's work can be found in the public collections of the China Printmaking Museum, the Sager Braudis Gallery, the Janet Turner Print Museum, and the Prints and Photos Division of the Library of Congress. Currently, he is the shop manager of Grafik House, a fine art print studio located in downtown St. Louis. Without further ado, I give you guys Emmett Merrill.
Hey, let's see if I can get this going. Thanks y'all for showing up. I've given a few artist talks before, but I've never had the pleasure of being able to watch myself do it in the corner during. So you'll bear with me and laughing at my own jokes, I guess. Let's see. Hi, yeah, so my name is Emmett Merrill. I'm from Kansas City originally, but these days I'm living in St. Louis, Missouri, where I'm part of artist collective and fine art print shop Grafik House. And this is a picture of our shop, which is actually my view right now, which is weird to show you guys pictures of a place that I'm in, but this is the time that we're in, right? Let's get my notes going. So we're here in downtown St. Louis. This is our front space where we have a little retail area. We host all these different types of printmaking. But a big influence for me lately, oh, kind of blocking, has been this idea of printmaking being this combination of fine art as well as the intersection of advertising and design, something that we've been going through like a bit of an identity crisis here at Grafik House and thinking about. So this is some matchbooks, actually. I've been fascinated by the concept of, you know, these things in printmaking that started out as things that weren't art forms, like matchbooks or cigar boxes, and how eventually they became fine art or something that we end up publishing books or putting into museums or galleries, things like that. So lithography ends up having this really deep history in that. These are two prints by Toulouse-Lautrec, who was making lithographs in Paris and using the process to advertise the Moulin Rouge, a cabaret there, and actually made the career of people like Jane Avril, who was one of the dancers. And these prints weren't seen as, I don't think, like fine art, but they were just advertising. And so they got so popular that he was going around and like he had the person with the glue, putting them up on walls. People would follow this guy around and they would peel these prints off the wall before the glue dried and take them home and put them up in their own houses and apartments. So they already had this thing that was beyond the sake of just being advertisement. People loved them for their sake of like being art objects. And now they're all in museums, and I can believe that that's probably why they've survived. If you're not familiar with stone lithography, which is what all the work in the show is, I'll give you a quick run through the process. The idea is that you have this piece of limestone you can draw on with this greasy pencil. Like in this, I'm gonna go ahead and make this smaller actually, because you can't really see very good. That kind of helped. But so you've got these pieces of limestone that are like range from all sizes, and they're flat on top, and you use this greasy pencil to draw on an image. And then through this process of mixing gum arabic and nitric acid, you can etch the image into the stone. And then once you get all that gum arabic and nitric acid off, when it's wet, the places where you drew with that grease will absorb this any kind of like ink material. So you can roll ink on and then run it through a press like this and pull an impression off of it. And you get a whole edition. And so this is how people used to like do advertisements and whatnot. But it was only after that lithography became replaced by offset printing that it became more of an art form. The stones for our shop, though, a year ago, like early into quarantine, this couple was going to their backyard and they were going to dig up this hole and put in a koi pond. But when they went to go dig it up, they found this whole weird, like, graveyard full of all of these old lithography stones. This is like unbelievable. This doesn't happen. These things are super expensive. They're really hard to come by. And there's this like 8-foot deep hole in their backyard that's filled to the brim with lithography stones. These things were insane too, because you would like pull them out. They had been buried by a commercial lithography company in the 1940s when they went out of business. They didn't know what to do with these stones, so they just kind of hid them like this buried treasure, and nobody knew about it. My partner Samantha and I, we drove like 8 hours across the country to go to this small town and fill my tiny like little Jetta Volkswagen with as many stones as it could carry. And these things were unbelievable. At the bottom of this pit, there were drawings on stones that had been sitting there since the 1940s. So you've got like, just shy of like 100 years old drawings. But the commercial printing company, they did printed tin trays for like Coca-Cola and beer, and then some architecture illustrations. So you had all these fantastic images like this Loresta advertisement. And this was the house. You can see how they have a good setup for a koi pond now. Anyway, that's been the basis of what we've been using at the shop to make all of our lithographs. But as I mentioned, lithography really only became an art form after the introduction of offset litho, which is how artists like Aubrey Beardsley and some of the later illustrators of like the Art Nouveau movement started to publish their own work. Beardsley's been this huge influence for me for the sake of he has these dramatic narratives, but uses so few lines. And these are really floral and like really well arranged. The space kind of exists, it kind of doesn't. These two images are taken from his illustrations for Oscar Wilde's Salome, which is different from the original play. In Oscar Wilde's version, as is illustrated here, Salome goes to John the Baptist prison cell and tries to seduce him, but John the Baptist turns her down. And so as a retaliation, she has him beheaded. And this is the final scene of the play where she holds up John the Baptist's head and finally kisses it. And it's this like brutal, strange, dark story. But I'm really attracted to how you get these dynamic narratives into the images. You almost don't need to read the book to kind of get the sense that something is insane going on in these drawings. Another big influence and reference point for me throughout my artistic career, I guess, has been Hieronymus Bosch. And these are two images from his larger painting, The Seven Deadly Sins. This one is gluttony. It's just so funny. Look at the guy drinking wine and this guy with this like funny look on his face, staring at the next plate, and this little kid on his lap jumping at him, and this insane hat behind them that has an arrow through it. I found myself really attracted to these Bosch paintings, and especially his prints, because when you look at it, all of these individual figures could occupy and work as their own image, but together they share one space, and they kind of live in the space together, but they could be their own little narrative moments, kind of like a tattoo flash sheet in a lot of ways. Hundreds and hundreds of years later from Bosch is Nick Dernasso. He's an artist out of Chicago who was working at a Trader Joe's, I think, the grocery store. And he would go home and then work on all these detailed little comics. This one is from his novel Sabrina, which actually won a major literary award a couple of years ago. Reading this book blew my mind, though, because I've sort of struggled with drawing and being good at it for most of my life. And seeing this, watching the way he can convey emotion, tell a story, but use as few lines as possible, it turned my artistic practice totally around and sort of gave me this permission to start making work that was considering every single line that got made. And then also using it to tell like kind of sad stories, I guess, you know. So now onto my work. All of that kind of leads to the spotty work I've been working on for the last couple of years. I've been calling River of Sticks Motel 6. This piece, River of Sticks, or Death Begets Two Lovers. I was talking to my friend Ashley a few years ago, and she was telling me about these two dogs that she had growing up, where whenever they walked, they would lean against each other. They were really old. So it was a really strange sight to see them out in the yard. They're kind of just leaning against each other to be able to both walk. And when one of the dogs inevitably died before the other, she said that the other dog would rock around crooked with this kind of weird limp now that it was alone. And she said that's how she felt when her boyfriend, Logan, wasn't around for a long period of time. It's like she was walking around crooked. And that was the most romantic thing I've ever fucking heard. And so this piece kind of became about that, that feeling of like, what is codependency between two people who are in love or in a relationship? And then what happens when one of those people is gone and the other person has to deal with like some point of loss and also finding their own independence. I have to say, though, I didn't know any of that in the process of making this. It's something that I think was figured out over time, which has been a theme for my work. Oh, there we go. Another thing I've been thinking about a lot was the idea of the Uncanny Valley. You know, the idea of like you meet like a robot cyborg or something that looks like a human but isn't. I was having that thought, but in relationship to like if like a duck thinks that when it sees like a whirligig, or like a person sees like a cutout of a person like on the side of the highway, and just sort of dwelling on like a simpler version of that concept. But then also the way I think in especially in Trump's America that was horrible for 4 years, the way people seem to be very easy for people to not see other people as being human beings. And that was something that I started to explore a lot more over the next few months. This was from Modern Times, the Charlie Chaplin movie. My grandma used to watch it and she would bawl every time at the end of Modern Times because it's like the only Charlie Chaplin movie that he doesn't walk off into the sunset by himself, which is really sweet and heartbreaking. So I made this piece kind of based on that idea where there's a movie night going on and you're projecting this scene, but as you're projecting it, it's in relationship with two ghosts that are walking off in the background, and it's hung up on this clothesline with this kind of invisible man thing going on, where it's an invisible man just for a moment as a bird flies a hat over a shirt that's hanging over some boots. And I think this was just another shot at me considering how there's this uncanny valley and trying to make connections between things in like art and things in life, and again, codependency of just people and needing to be around people. There's this Hank Williams song. It's kind of a problematic one, but it's really good. It's called Kalijah. It's about this wooden Indian who's in a department store, and like a wooden cigar Indian who falls in love with another wooden cigar Indian across the store, but they're both statues, so they can't talk to each other. And then one of them gets sold and the other one's sad and is like, damn it, I should have made a move or said something. I was sort of reimagining this as if you're in like the middle of the Midwest or like rural Illinois, and a tornado would like whip through and rip off these two figures from like highway billboards and land them next to each other in the same field. So they get to kind of like be next to each other again. At the bottom of this print, I did kind of like a history of Western art, starting with the Venus of Willendorf on the left, ending with the Modigliani composition in primary colors or composition with red. And then in the center, to reference the sort of two statues that are in love with each other, I have the Boxer from the Hellenistic period in Greece and the Venus de Milo. And then some printmaking supplies like vegetable oil and lithothene. Around that time, I was living in Knoxville, Tennessee, but I was spending a lot of time driving and moving on the highway and going back and forth between there and St. Louis and Chicago. And I actually was driving back and I was coming through Nashville, and it was the night of those horrible tornadoes that just ripped apart the city. And it was like really late at night, and it was really scary, and you could kind of see them in the back, like really far away in the distance. And it was just this like tense, like white knuckling drive through Tennessee. And the next day I woke up and put on NPR, which in Knoxville only plays for like 2 hours a day, which is insane. But anyway, they said that these tornadoes had totally whipped through and destroyed Nashville. And I was like, I just drove through that, holy shit. And I ended up making this piece kind of about that feeling of the outside and like outside world just coming in and like entering our own space where we don't have any control over like what nature, how nature interacts with us. Manifested in this girl's bathroom as she's looking at herself and putting on makeup. And then COVID hit. I had been setting up a show in Knoxville, and the next day everything shut down. And so I took everything out of this gallery, put it in the back of my car, and drove straight to St. Louis because Illinois as a state was going to shut down. And at the time, I think you all remember, like nobody really knew what that meant yet. And so I came back to St. Louis and isolated for 6 weeks. And then around then we started building our print shop, Grafik House. And the work since then started to combine sort of inside and exterior spaces in this sort of anxiety between what's it like to live inside all the time or isolated from everybody and live in this sort of in-between non-real space. So this print is called The Nightmare, where some figures wearing the mask over their eyes instead of over their mouth. These snakes kind of represent death or this feeling of it being all around. And then you're laying down, kind of doing nothing, watching Tiger King and just trying to process this strange time. Oh, you can't really see this one. Let me see if I can move you guys around. There we go. So then I started thinking I'd really missed lithography and making prints while I was in isolation. And so I made a lot of drawings about lithography. And so on the left, you've got this figure who's doing this strange ritual over a broken stone. And on the right, whenever we did start to see our friends again and feel guilty about it, but also really happy to see them, this is like a new normal birthday party, wearing party masks instead of N95 masks. This print about the derivation of ghost stories. A few years ago, I've been driving around rural Illinois, and I've been reading online. I found this haunted graveyard, and it was called Blood's Point Road and Blood's Point Cemetery. And the idea was that you drove down this long, desolate road, and the trees were supposed to bend so that they would warn you not to go down this road. But if you did follow it, you get to this little graveyard at the end with all these graves from the 1800s. And part of this idea was that if you came there at midnight, hellhounds would run at you, and then right as they were about to bite you, they would disappear. So I was like, I gotta go check this graveyard out. And I get down there, and there's nothing there except for these really, pretty graves and like a beautiful Illinois landscape. And there was actually 3 cows walking around in it. But I did some research and found that this poor town with this haunted cemetery is plagued by all these kids who come up and check it out because it's haunted. And so there's all this like graffiti and people camping out on lawns and walking around people's fields and property. So much so that the irony becomes that these locals are haunted by tourists in a way more than tourists or anybody's haunted by any actual ghosts. And so I was thinking a lot about that. And I think that's where a lot of the ghost imagery has been coming up for me. Another place that I've been thinking about, especially with things like the highway and travel, is that sort of limbo that you spend when you go to an airport. So this is Airport Bar. And again, you can see where there's this overlap of the outside, like plants entering inside spaces. And then I was thinking about this concept of what if we got really creative early on in the pandemic, and instead of wearing N95 masks, we actually made these whole real animal masks or something and walked around and looked all cool. I guess that didn't catch on. You can barely get people to wear normal masks. But this was sort of about that. And again, the anxiety of going back into airports and traveling and sort of living in an in-between space again. This print, New Year's Eve, I think a little self-explanatory. I think is a little bit how everybody was feeling towards the end of 2020. And then more thoughts on ghost stories and seeing dead deer on the side of the highway. One of my biggest fears is driving and running into one of these things. And so they almost have this mythical presence to me, seeing a deer on the side of the road. They're really beautiful, and it's really cool when you see one that's just like kind of prancing around, but you're also like sort of frightened of them. They hold all this sort of delicate power to anybody who's driving. So Grafik House, we've been working on a Patreon page. And so our patrons can sign up and subscribe to any different kind of printed material or object that we make, which to hark back to the beginning is something else I think is good about printmaking, which is where it can live in 2 places, where one, it can be ephemera, it can be something that's easily affordable, but then mutually fine art. So this was a pin that JT Felix designed, and I did the illustrations for and wrote this little love letter to the highway and how much we miss traveling on it. And it's based on the Love's gas station. If any of you are familiar with it, cleanest bathrooms on the road. I swear, it's my favorite gas station. But more recently, I found that these sort of side projects start to leach into my fine art practice and new lithographs. So this is the piece that I'll leave you guys with. This one's called Doppelganger, and it's a kind of a combination of the future of the Morton Salt girl grown up at a Love's gas station. And then the idea that you can be sort of more than one person at one time, where, I don't know, I look back at like who I was a year ago and almost don't recognize myself with all this new information and all this stuff that has happened in over 2020. All right, that's all I got for you guys. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you so much, Emmett. That was such a treat, kind of really being able to dive into the narrative behind each one of these prints. You rarely get that kind of information when you come in and see a show. So I really appreciate you taking that time with everyone. If anyone has any questions, feel free to kind of unmute yourself and speak up now, or you can put it in the chat box, however you want to manage that. But yeah, I have a question. I'll just get started here. So is lithograph, has that always been your preferred process in printmaking, or is that kind of something that you're working in now? How did you come to lithograph?
Well, I used to only do woodcuts and drawings, but I was introduced to it by my professor, Beauvais Lyons, in Knoxville a few years ago. And as I got more into it, I started to find that the whole community around it and people that have been doing it for most of their lives have this really mythic attitude towards it. One artist, Catherine Polk, who her work is unbelievable. If you don't know her, look it up. I helped her run one of her prints a couple years ago, and she actually has somebody who she'll call, and whenever she's processing a stone that she's just finished drawing on, she'll hold her cell phone over it and have the person that she called do this sort of mystical blessing on it before she processes it. And there's somebody else, Richard Peterson, once talked about like saying that you could drink lithothene and it wouldn't hurt you, which is not true, but just that he has this sort of like almost body connection to the process, you know, is really inspiring. So I think I like litho for the sake of its look and its tactility, but I've stayed with the medium for its community and the cult dedication of its followers.
Nice. That's awesome. I do have some questions here rolling in the chat box. Katrina said, the story is fascinating. Are there any, oh, I'm sorry, hold on, I missed one here. Okay, well, Ada, I'm going to skip to this question. Are there any Asian influences in your work? She said she feels some of that.
Oh, absolutely. I think especially the Japanese woodcuts and artists like Hokusai, and the way they map out their compositions, where similar, I think it's similar to Bosch, that everyone it's very flat, but everyone occupies their own space in a composition. And just the way that they're really elongated, you can kind of like follow things down. I love that work. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Nice. And Katrina wants to know, is there any significance to the balloons in various prints that you have?
Oh yeah, man, there's got to be, right? I think it started as in the Uncanny Valley concept, where if you have like a bird that's looking at this whirligig and is like, having this sort of existential crisis, I had this idea of like, what if a human being was looking at a smiley face balloon and being like, I know that this is a human being thing, but I don't see myself in this. And I think that that's where the balloon started to come from.
Nice. And yeah, someone else wants to know any significance of some of the repeated images and objects in your work, like the coffee pots, for instance, I guess keep popping up in a few prints. Oh yeah.
I had this thought of a metaphor a few years ago where a human being's like a cup, or at least I'm like a cup. Like in the morning, I'm full of coffee, and in the afternoon or in the evening, I'm full of wine. So it's sort of, for me, I thought it represented to have on the left side of an image, coffee, and then on the right side of it, you would have wine or a beer or something. It's my, I guess, representation of the passing of time. So as you read through an image, it implies that it's not all happening at one time, that it happens over the image, kind of like as you read like hieroglyphs, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Definitely, I love that. I'm really interested in your color palette. I notice, of course, like the majority of the pieces in the show have this like really soft, muted, and kind of pastel, like pinks and yellows in some of them. Is that specific to this body of work, or do you find yourself kind of working in a palette, in that palette all the time?
I think I've definitely adopted that palette of like greens, and like I love that pink. It's like the same color as like sunsets, but then also like urinal cakes. So it's like cheap, but also really beautiful at the same time. I think it just happened naturally. I worked mostly in woodcut and black and white before I started doing lithography. And I think a lot of the bright color palette started to come out of, I think, my naivete of not knowing how to work with color, and then just experimenting and being like, oh, this red is the same color as the last red, damn it. And just kind of learning over time, I think.
Yeah, do you have to mix a lot of those colors like way in advance to get that consistency? Or do you ever kind of get like, oh, that pink is like 2 shades off, I messed it up?
Oh, yes, man, I'm such a bad printmaker because I burn so much ink doing that. You have to use like a lot of transparent base and then a little bit of the actual ink pigment to sort of tint it, at least for the process that I do. And I used to get made fun of in graduate school because I had to have all these test strips of ink colors. They're called drawdowns, and there'd be piles and piles and piles of these things. And my friend Connor looked at them or found a flat file that I had full of them, and he was like, "You're like a crazy person. This is like the thing you find in somebody's house before you like get scared." So did that answer your question? I thought that was a weird tangent. Or yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm still blown away that you guys found all of those limestones. That is such a bizarre, and like, you have to believe like, yes, I'm doing what I should be doing with my life if I find something like this, right?
Oh my God. Yeah, right. Because I was like, I'm, never doing lithography again. I don't know like where I'm gonna ever have access to it. And these like, I think the luck being that like you have this couple that not only finds these stones, but doesn't just throw them out.
Right.
Because they were going to take them to a landfill, and the woman who owns the house, she like looks in, she sees it, a Coca-Cola advertisement on one of them, and is like, I think we got to check these out. And she went to her grandfather, and he had the like wherewithal to be like, oh man, you guys got to sell these. And but they were so inconveniently located that no university would want to come pick them up. So they just reached out on Facebook and were like, we don't want these things. We wanted a koi pond. We have all these stupid like rocks in our backyard. Will you please just, and a bunch of people showed up to this town, and we all dug them out, and yeah, it's been great.
That is so cool. Yeah, someone said in the chat box, it's the mysticism of the lithography.
Yeah, the litho gods, they shine on us all.
Can I ask a question? I really love that you reference Hieronymus Bosch. I feel like his paintings like have all these motifs in them where he imbues like different meaning into every single little thing in his painting. Do you see yourself doing that in your prints where you have like, I feel like you have so many motifs, like do you assign meaning to everything?
I think most of it over time has had some meaning assigned to it. And I think that's like only for the sake of, it gets difficult when someone like looks at something and is like, oh, what does that mean or represent? And it would get tiring to be like, I don't know. I was like looking at a dog today, and I thought it would be cool to draw one with 2 heads on top of a pink flamingo boat thing. And that started to feel like a cheap answer to be like, I don't know. So these things had to mean something. And I think that deciding after the fact is a lot easier of a way to make things have meaning rather than to like think of an idea and then illustrate it. If that makes, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned ghost stories a lot in your work. What makes you so drawn to ghost stories?
I think it's that, I don't know. I think it's maybe like the way movies portray ghost stories, especially in like the 80s and 90s, where it's like always kind of a fall day. and it's always like a field in a small town. And there's something very like kind of Americana and kitsch about that I've always been fascinated with. And then part of it, I think I've also been attracted to like older cities and older buildings, and everyone seems to have a ghost story in their town or about their area. And I just liked hearing them and collecting them. There was this book I was reading called Ghosts Along the Cumberland, about a collection of ghost stories in this area in Kentucky. And these graduate students and their professor were all studying folklore, and they went and were just interviewing locals and asking them about ghost stories. And they got really dramatic ones, and they got some that were just, you weren't sure why they even kept telling these stories. Like one of them was, I had this cow, but it had died. But then my buddy went up to this field and he saw that cow. So it was a ghost. And that's the end of the story. And I think that stuff like those are the ghost stories that really attracted me, where it was like a story for this the sake of being a story.
Awesome, thank you. And oh, there's a question in the chat box from Daniel. Did you go through any challenges in allowing yourself to explore your subject matter of combining mysticism with the everyday life?
I don't think so. I feel like it's easy. I think everyone kind of has some level of like making up little stories for yourself to make your day-to-day more interesting or more fun. So it's been, it just felt natural for me to be like, all right, I'm going to draw a picture of like a flying like deer with arrows through it, and then have that right next to like a fish in a fishbowl or a box of wine. It's just, it's almost like when something goes too far into the mysticism side, I have this thing where it's like, I don't really want to make art just about that. I kind of want to make stuff about my experience in life and the objects I surround myself with. So I think I really enjoy where those two extremes can kind of coexist. I mean, you look at any of those like Bosch or Bruegel prints, and you have this insane thing happening, and then you have like a broom on the ground, or like an umbrella, or like a stick. You know, they were doing kind of the same thing, I think. Yeah.
And I've got a question for you. First, I'm Rebecca. Thanks so much for talking about your artwork, because I'm like fascinated. I didn't know anything about you before I got on here, and it's so, I love your work. My question has to do with the flowers, or the, I guess the things that you sometimes depict either in the ground or in flower pots, the plants. What significance do those have, or how did you, I find them just so interesting that they're like blobs of color with a little bit of texture, but they like emulate plants.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, by the way. I really appreciate it. Well, those I think became a way to sort of like decorate the surrounding imagery. And I've been looking at a lot of Aubrey Beardsley, like I had shown earlier. And there's one drawing of his called The Kiss of Judas. It's a really strange one if you like look it up. In the foreground of it, there is this cluster of flowers, and it's just a mix of these lines and dashes and dots, and it's really complex, but you read exactly what it is. And it takes up a really good majority of the image. And I think I was just looking at it and trying to figure out how he drew it. And that's where those flowers started to come from. Just the sake of, I think, having a narrative, and then the lush Art Nouveau thing about like, I'm going to decorate it like all around, make it all like connect, I guess. Yeah,
I love that. Plants created with just simple lines, but you can totally get what is being trying to be portrayed. The body of work that you showed us today, how long have you been working on that? I have no idea of lithography and how long it takes to like etch a stone or anything like that, but has it been years, months? Like what has been the lineage of this particular body of work?
This one's been, I started in the fall of 2019. So it's been, I guess, geez, almost 3 years now. It takes about, or at least for me, a month to finish a print. From like full thinking of the idea to drawing it to etching and printing. And a lot of that I think just comes with life happening in between all of it. But for me, I think the process has been nice because I know that artists that I've known at least can have trouble keeping up their studio practice or body of work when they're out of ideas, or if they've like really exerted themselves on one piece and then don't know where to follow that piece up with. And I found with printmaking in general, especially lithography, that just sort of having this given process where it's like you draw on a stone, you etch it, you print it, and then you grain that image off, and then you have a surface to draw on the stone again, and then repeat. I think I've just fallen for that in this sort of like monthly pattern. Has been nice to keep up a practice.
Got it. So the technique in itself has almost like a rinse, wash, repeat cycle that helps keep you in the rhythm of making work, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then once you like have a stone grained with the image off of it, you kind of look over and like, oh man, your idea almost doesn't matter anymore. So I can just go draw whatever on it because I'll do another one next month. If it sucks, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Which I think it kind of it relieves the scariness of a blank page, I guess, having that wash, rinse, repeat.
100%. I think you actually answered one of the other questions I had, which was that all those stones you found, you use them, you like, I think your term is like you grained them off, or you made them a clear slate again and then kept making prints on them. I don't think I picked that up in the beginning.
Oh yeah, totally. And that was kind of the cool thing about the stones from the Ohio, is that when we got them back here, they've got these images that have been sitting on them for like 80 years. And so it almost feels like sacrilege, but you like use a levigator and remove that and then draw on it. And you're like, I'm the first person to do this in almost 100 years. So yeah, it's cool. And I think it makes them really democratic material, because the idea is that, you know, they're sort of impermanent and they're meant to be shared and have lives of their own. Like these things will be around after I'm dead, and then some 27-year-old grad student will dig them out of what used to be Grafik House.
That's awesome. Speaking of Grafik House, I'll ask one more question and then I'll let other people ask questions. Do people come visit Grafik House? My sister lives in St. Louis and sometimes I visit her. I'm in rural America, south of Kansas City right now, but do you have visitors come see your work or come see the studio?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a little retail space in the front. Here it is. But we don't really have open hours. We tend to do it by appointment only. Okay. It's a really nice little shop. So we love to have visitors and give quick tours and have people come and say hey to us while we're working. So yeah, please, if they're ever in town, come visit us and say hi. We'd love to have you. Absolutely,
I will for sure. Thanks for answering all my questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
I have a quick process question. Now with litho, I'm familiar with other print processes, but with litho, do you have to, do you like add a color each time you print and then like etch more and add a color and print it? Like how does that part work? Because your prints have so many colors in them that it kind of blows my mind. Like, how does this happen?
Yeah, so let's see if I can pull this up real quick. I do one color at a time. If you look close here, you can see the black is where the pink is making the print. My process for adding color is like kind of sacrilegious, I found, in like lithography. I'll draw with Sharpie and then roll that up and then print on top of the black and white image. The person who taught me that was actually my partner Samantha, but she learned it from her professor Richard Peterson in California, and he taught his students that. And before he sent them all off to different schools, he was like, "Listen, your other lithography professors, they're going to hate this process, but wait till nighttime, print it at night, and show them in the morning, and they won't know any difference." And so that's what she,
That's a good one.
but yeah, it's nice because you can do, if it's all over the stone, you can do one color at a time, but then if you want to do a few different ones, you can sort of dab color into different areas and sort of have this painterly approach to it.
Nice. We do have another question in the chat box here. It says, this question is coming from a sophomore struggling to find the right niche. Did your visual language develop through appreciation of other artists, and what helped you to find your own language?
Yes. Are you a sophomore at the Art Institute?
Skylar Bridgman?
Ooh.
You can yourself? Yes.
Well, I guess it is.
Yes.
Awesome. I think that, yeah, I think it's from looking at other artists and other people. And I think a lot of it, although it's difficult to tell yourself that that's what you're doing at the time, a lot of it, I think, is copying artwork and artists that you really admire. And eventually, I think it goes through the machine that is yourself and your own hand enough times that eventually it spits out something that's completely and uniquely yours. There were so many different artists, even with friends who I was didn't know at the time, but I was copying their work. And then later on, as it kept going through, I think the machine of like my own hand, it was all of a sudden like a completely different thing. But I have to say, I don't think I've really felt comfortable or felt like I had any visual language until 3 years ago. So it took a long time of getting there. And I think some people get it like on day one. But it took me a long time. But I think especially looking at other artists and following down the rabbit hole of things that you are really interested in is the biggest thing. Because then you can find your little niche and your little family of artists, whether you know them or you know that you work in their kind of style. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. My name is Brett. I'm kind of new to your work, but I've been stalking you on Instagram and it's all great. I'm curious about your compositions because they're so dense, and you're talking about filling in spaces with these other bits of your own visual language to tie into the last question. But I'm just wondering how you put compositions together with all these details and other references, because maybe you're planning out every little detail on paper ahead of time, but maybe you're just diving right into the stone and like adding this information like little bit at a time. And when do you decide that it's done?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, let me pull one of these things up. I think for me, and something that why I've started to feel attracted to artists who have sort of standalone images, is that the entire composition is a little bit too intimidating for me to start with. So I'll start drawing one piece of it or one element of it, and then slowly add more. It kind of like making little ornaments and then kind of moving them around. And I think that it took a while to know when things were done. I think that's just for the sake of I would make a drawing, or at least plan out a drawing and a composition, and then have this anxiety about like, did I spend enough time on that? Like, did I pay enough penance to be finished with this thing? And for a while, I started to just make myself put more stuff and more detail and whatever into these drawings and compositions. And then they became too crowded, and there was too much information, and it just wasn't as genuine. So I think I'm starting to figure out that in-between point of when something's finished. But yeah, I think the compositions for the most part, we'll start with one thing in one area. Like for this one, I started with the couple, and then was like, all right, so I'll have some two-headed dog right beneath them. And then, all right, I'll have another dog here. So there's kind of a swooping area of the composition, but then there's this open spot. and it's like, I need something to go there. Would it be ghost? Perfect. And then that. So it really is reactionary to the last thing that was drawn.
Jose Faust said he's stealing your line, that did I pay enough penance to be finished with this? I think
Oh my God.
that's something a lot of artists really struggle with.
Yeah, totally. It's like guilt. I don't know, for doing something that you think looks good already. Also, hi Jose. Yeah, my dad is. I think you're friends with him, and he's a big fan of your work as well, as am I.
Yes, good morning, Jose, out there in the ether, the Zoom. Welcome. Yeah. Nice. Oh, let me see. We have another comment in here. Oh, he said he's in bed. So he said hello from bed. He's not turning his video on.
So weird.
Nice. Well, we're kind of here at the almost 11 o'clock hour. So if anyone else has any more questions for Emmett, definitely speak up now or forever hold it. And also, if you haven't been into the gallery to see this work in person, please do yourself a favor and stop in Wednesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. They're, you know, you think they were cool on your screen this morning, they're gorgeous in person. So definitely stop in and see what we're talking about this morning. And Emmett, we really appreciate your time this morning, and thanks for showing with us. It's been a real treat. Yeah, I put his Instagram handle in here. It is singular stag print. So follow him, check out his work, you know, keep in touch. If anyone has anything else, definitely, yeah, you can share now. But thanks everyone for joining us this morning. It's been a real treat, and we are recording this, and so we'll put it out, Emmett will send it to you, and we'll put it on our website and stuff like that, so you guys can watch later. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me, and thanks for listening.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing, and I hope everyone has a great